Hey everyone, it's Ivan, kitpatcher.com, out here today to go over my loadout from the 2023 Modern Minuteman Course. If you're unfamiliar with the Modern Minuteman Course by AMTAC Shooting, think of it as a combination of learning and then practical app in the form of a competition. So day one, largely shooting, pistol, carbine, and working land nav. Day two is basically a race, kind of competition of sorts with a bunch of land nav and different challenges to include shooting thrown in there. So this is all the gear I used for that. This one being the first kind of open enrollment, like Winter Modern Minuteman Course. Previously did a video on the, regular one down in Goldendale, Washington. But this stuff is what I ended up using, and largely it did pretty good. I'll kind of start at the bottom as far as layers, outerwear, stuff like that, and eventually we'll jump into my pack. But starting at the bottom, I ended up actually borrowing these from a buddy of mine. These are the snowshoes by MSR. I don't think they make this model anymore, Denali Ascent, but these did a great job for me on a couple fronts. One, they weren't overly big, and some of that comes down to snow conditions. It was pretty cold and hard, kind of icy, so I didn't need tons of lift. They actually make tails that go on these if you're going through like deep powder. And yeah, no, I was really pleased. And some of your traditional snowshoes, it'll be basically like a hoop of aluminum tubing, which is terrible unless you're on like a groomed trail, because it'll want to slide laterally. So with these, you basically have these metal runners going down like aggressive. And what that allows largely is side hilling, which became really important, especially land nav portion of kind of the race part of it. But ended up wearing these, not overly big. It could still run and move in them, which was good. And yeah, pleased with them. As far as footwear, I am a big fan of like minimalist footwear. Not really any such thing when it comes to cold weather stuff. And these are probably the best boots I have found to date, as far as like actual cold weather boots that you can do things in. And these are the Solomon Tundras. They have like aerogel. I reviewed them a while back, but these things are amazing. Keep your feet nice and warm, and yeah, pretty clutch when it's cold. So then getting into kind of layers. Wanting things that will basically wick moisture away and still keep you warm. And then with that, you kind of have to self-regulate, whether it's through like mechanical venting and things like that, shedding layers, or just moving slower so you ideally don't wet stuff out. But for socks, I was wearing these guys by Fitz, basically like over the calf ski socks. Again, merino wool, did a good job. I had two pairs, wore one day one. The other one I basically swapped out on day two, like right before the race kicked off. As far as kind of base layer underwear, I didn't wear like underwear, just wore these, which are a merino base layer actually made by Tactical Distributors. Really nice, lightweight, comfortable, and yeah, wick moisture away, which ended up being really important in that competition part. As far as a top, is running this guy right here, which again, level 1 merino base layer. This one by First Spear, I forget the exact model. There'll be links down below where you can check all this stuff out. And again, this is not very warm, but it's long sleeved, and again, that transfer of moisture. So depending, this was actually perfect. Again, depending on the output level, which I'll speak to in just a second. So those were kind of base layers. And then as far as my pants, both days, I was wearing these. These are by Beyond. They're pretty awesome. They're actually really nice and soft inside. They are a soft shell, and all of the pockets are zippered, and they're all kind of vented too. So you can actually open the pockets and use it as a form of mechanical venting. And then of course zip them up so that you don't get cold if it's really cold. These are probably my favorite like winter actual out in the mountain pants, because of those zippers. Personally, day to day, I hate zippers. Like, I don't like wearing these around because it doesn't really give me access to my tools, knife, flashlight, tourniquet, whatever, because now I have to basically unzip this thing, or I leave the zipper down, and not a big fan of zippers. But when you're in the mountains and you're pushing through trees and snow's falling on you, you want all those pockets closed up. So these actually did a really good job. Also just kind of shedding moisture. They're treated with DWR. And then I guess one more kind of mid layer. So depending on what we were doing, that one like thin merino wool shirt from First Spear, not a lot of insulation. Whereas this, which is a level 2, I think it's their Celeris by Beyond, pretty nice. It has thumb holes, hood, half zip, so you can actually mechanically vent a lot with it, and it's fairly warm. Nothing for wind resistance, but again, fairly warm, and ability to transfer moisture away. So largely all through day 1, I was wearing that right there. And that coupled with this right here, which is basically like a little wind light rain shell by Beyond also, did a really good job. As long as my output level was sufficient to keep me warm, which largely it was on day 1, basically between those layers and what we were doing, it did a really good job. And then of course, if I needed to mechanically vent, I could. And then actually on day 2, during the competition, I knew this was going to be a no-go. Like, I was going to be too warm because of the output level. So I stripped this off, and I just had that merino base layer by First Spear, and then this on. This was honestly almost too warm. Like, not that this is warm, but basically the output level that I was working at was too warm. But I needed it because you're pushing through all kinds of basically thick, dark timber that had like fresh 2 inches of powder on it. So snow's constantly falling on you. And so being able to have this kept me from just constantly getting snow on me. And granted, snow would still get on me, but it wouldn't like stick on that merino base layer and then soak in. And I will say during the competition, like, I pretty much wet everything out. That merino base layer with this over it, same with the merino base layer long underwear from Tactical Distributors. All that stuff got wet out, but being merino, pulled the moisture away, and because of the other layers it was paired with, allowed me to eventually dry out, like, as that activity level basically was reduced. And then last couple layers, I guess, beanie. This one right here, again, merino by Prometheus Design Works. I love beanies, and this one I actually really enjoy too. It does a really good job of capturing heat, but at the same time, just being like lightweight and stuff like that, and being able to essentially regulate temperature. So really easy to just pull this off when you start to get warm, and then if you stop movement for whatever reason, you're going to be static for a little bit, you can throw this back on. Really nice layer with respect to just maintaining core temperature. So that was pretty clutch. Gloves. Brought these, reviewed them before. They're great for all kinds of things. Didn't really use them for that course just because of the way the course was set up. Didn't really have a use for them. Mainly because you're not going to shoot in those, and we weren't doing tons of like bushcraft where like need to go break sticks for like a half an hour and get a bunch of wood to run a fire overnight or things along those lines. I did, however, use this, which is really nice. It is by Coltac. It clips around and basically like a knuckle roaster. Really nice fleece on the inside, draw cords, and I would keep my hands in here, keep them nice and warm. I also threw a couple heaters, like chemical heaters in here, so I'd hold them during especially the shooting portion, because if your hands don't work, pretty hard to pull the trigger. And for my hands, duct tape from somewhere, I was wearing these by SKD Tactical. These are the Press Check Assault gloves. They're pretty cool. One, touch capacitive, which I like because I'm always doing camera stuff, working screens. and you can actually shoot pistol like pretty well in them, plenty of dexterity. And so these actually wore during the race, for part of the race anyway, and definitely all day the first day. And it was really good shooting because guns slung, like my rifle and stuff, yeah, it's a contact glove. When you grab something really cold, because it's below freezing, it's really cold. So not having bare skin contact was pretty important. So that right there is kind of layers and all that stuff. Jump into kind of some of the gear I carried on my person. Since we needed to have a pistol on us as well as a way to carry ammunition, I ended up going kind of an unconventional route. The first Modern Minuteman course was largely predicated on, hey, all your gear kind of stowed or concealed. So you could essentially go from this course, like go walk downtown, and it's like, cool, you have a backpack, carbine broken down in it, concealed, pistol, blades, all that stuff. This one, it was like, hey, you can run plate carriers, stuff like that. I actually kind of went back the other direction to where under that outer layer, that kind of wind shell, I had this right here, which is the Unity Tactical Clutch, basically like a tactical cummerbund. So there's all these cells in here, and over on this side, I actually had my holster in here from Black Point Tactical, and I'm shooting this pistol right here, which is the Walther F Series, their PDP, and Streamlight on there, and this primary arms optic. This actually did a really good job for me. I mean, I obviously had to do my part, but yeah, it did good. And drawing out from here totally worked. Because of how many cells and the way it was set up, I had my pistol mags over here on the same side as my pistol. And then over on the other side, on one of these cells, I had my AK mag. And then the cell behind it, I was running comms, which I'll get to in a second. But overall, this really small, compact package and allowed me to carry everything pretty comfortably. And if I wanted that outer shell, I could go ahead, zip it up, and everything was concealed, barring my rifle, which I could have put inside my pack, but I didn't. But we'll get to the rifle later. So this actually did a really good job for me, though, both during kind of that pistol portion as well as just through the rest of the competition. The often forgotten part of that trifecta of shoot, move, communicate, communications, pretty important. And especially during that course, one for safety, and there was a bunch of information that was getting passed over the radio. Like, got to communicate. So I was using this Bofang radio, and then my auto engineering headset. And something I actually appreciate is they actually make their own push-to-talk, so it actually works. A lot of push-to-talks out there don't work with certain headsets. They're like, this is our headset, this is our push-to-talk. It all works together, which is great. So I ended up having this, again, in the Unity Tactical Clutch, and then I just had push-to-talk clipped to that outer windbreaker and had these on. They did a good job for me with, one, their amplified hearing protection. So you can hear everything, all your range commands and stuff like that, and as soon as you break a shot, cancels it, and you don't end up with permanent hearing loss. Bonus. And then on top of that, you can, of course, use your radio with it. And this did a really good job for me, both on the range, which, as you imagine it would, but then during the competition too, to where I had all my comms and I had Ear Pro, rather than getting to like a shooting challenge and having to dig out Ear Pro or something like that, or just not having comms on me. I will say these ear cups, they're gel, and once they warm up, they're actually really comfortable. But when you're moving really fast and sweating a lot, they also just get really sweaty and capture all the sweat. So eventually what happened, in part because people's radios, push-to-talk, whatever it was, people would keep breaking squelch. It's really annoying when like your radio's turned up. So what I ended up actually doing is pulling these things off, and they would rest around my neck, or I would just carry them. And I basically would turn up my radio so I could hear my comms like through the earpiece, even though it wasn't over my head. And then if I needed to actually use comms, I'd just throw them on real quick for the mic, Or again, I could hear things that got passed over the net just through that open ear cup while I was moving. And then I wasn't just sweating into them when started pushing and exerting really hard. But overall, really happy with this setup. Also, a couple things on my person was my map, as well as protractor, map pin in a Ziploc. Carried that around, kind of needed that. And then compass. This one right here by Brunton, I believe it is. And kind of nice in that it has protractor built in. I will say, like, a true 1 in 24,000ths protractor is easier to use than this one, but had both of that stuff for kind of that land nav. And then iPro, again, wear prescription glasses. Finally got a pair, if I can open it. A new pair of prescription glasses. These right here by Zini Optical. They are kind of their like safety glasses, so you can get like ballistic lenses. And yeah, they actually did a really good job for me. Pretty much wore them throughout the entire course. There was definitely a time when I wasn't shooting and just moving where they would start to fog up. So I basically would throw them right on my collar and press on, because yeah, they did fog up because a lot of output. Which brings us to pack and stuff like that. So this actual backpack itself, I've had since I was a teenager. I think I bought it when I was maybe 17 or something like that. I've had it for a very long time, by Gregory, and it's done a good job for me. I ended up bringing and not using these trekking poles with snow baskets. Depending on what you're doing out of doors, these can be really, really helpful. But kind of where we were going through a lot of like really just dark timber, like cedars and stuff like that, so close together. And for me personally, I think these would have kind of been in the way. So I had them, should I need them, but I didn't use them. In part two, we weren't moving through like really deep high powder or something like that, but had those guys. And then also strapped on here, because I do video stuff, I had my tripod, which my camera's on right now, and then clipped onto here. I actually had my Pelican case with my camera and all that, which I did not carry during the race portion, but had to bring all of our gear initially under our own power on snowshoes up there. Then down at the bottom here, I have basically strapped on here, essentially just kind of like a ground pad of sorts. So there's this one, and then inside there, essentially kind of like Mylar wrapped bubble wrap. And didn't really use it because it didn't need to like lay out a ground pad to sleep or anything like that, but I actually pulled it out so I could throw my pack on it, keep it from getting wet when we were kind of down on the range doing stuff there. And then the idea, of course, Modern Minuteman is you have things you need, like stay alive gear, like useful stuff in your pack. And so to that end, I'll kind of go through, deconstruct my pack. Had a fuel cell for my stove, which I'll get to in a minute. A couple different DACA pouches. This one right here, I had a few hand warmers in, and then something else that's pretty clutch is a way to charge things, like think cell phone, because depending on what type of gear you're using, you probably have electronics like a cell phone. By way of example, I was using my phone actually for basically as GPS. And so I ended up using it that first day, and then during the competition used it. And even on low power mode, it got down to about 20%. This thing was fully charged. So I had charged it the previous night and then also ended up charging it later that day. This one's pretty cool too. Basically has all three different connectors, USB-C, micro USB, and iPhone. And then, you can charge it. And can't do it with my gloves. Basically, little forks stick out, plug straight into the wall, charges itself up. Pretty handy. And DACA pouches, great for organizing. So I also had this big DACA pouch, bunch of little kind of necessities. Had some toilet paper in there, should I need it. Toothbrush, toothpaste, some more hand warmers, and some little packets of instant coffee, which I did need and use on that morning. And then, anything else in here? Oh, I also had 2 of these, which are basically just little ponchos, like plastic ponchos. So if I needed to put down some sort of ground cover, something like that, I could pull one of these guys out, or for that matter, kind of make a shelter with it. And then getting into the main compartment, I had inside here was my cup for said coffee. I had the stove, which I managed to end up kill. Funny story, one of the things we had was a fire challenge, and it was like, hey, you need to get a fire going with basically finger-sized wood. Anyway, go. And so I'm like, I'm gonna just use my stove. And so basically, I ended up using my stove. Got a fire going, kind of. I was using wet wood, so it took a while, but I basically built a fire around the stove. I'm like, why not? I mean, if I was in a bad way and there was a time crunch and I needed to start a fire, sure, like I'll do that. And there was a time crunch because it was a like scored event. I think I came in 3rd, but yeah, I should have just got better wood. But in the process, I think I pretty much killed the stove. So end up probably need to replace that. And then basically this pot inside just this bag for the sake of storage. Then inside the rest of this water bottle, this one by Prometheus Design Works. It is insulated, pretty important when it's really cold. If you haven't been cold places and you have just like a regular like Nalgene bottle or something, your water will freeze, which is not good when you are thirsty and dehydrated. So I had that extra pair of socks I had talked about. And then I had these 2 bags, one with pistol, and I don't even think I had loose ammo in here. Yeah, basically I had pre-jammed all my mags that I was gonna need for the course, for that Walther F-Series. Those were all in there. And then there's a little bit of loose ammo in here. But again, pre-jammed all my mags for my AK in that one. So I had all that stuff. And then the last couple things in here was warming layers. Again, stay alive gear. Like, if you're somewhere cold, you don't want to necessarily just be miserable because you're like, well, I'm going to pack really light and I should be okay. Because if you get in a bad way and you're static, you want to be warm. And I didn't know how static we were going to be, especially during day 1, where it was more like instruction. So I had my level 7 pants and level 7 jacket. All the snow. Level 7 pants and jacket by Beyond. In part, well, this is the level 7 from Wild Things. Between the 2, I think this one's actually a little bit warmer, but this one is most certainly more compressible. So I believe this is their Cetra Durable L7. So I had that stuff going. Then lastly, in this waterproof compression stack, I had the Spike Lake 15-degree down bag by Big Agnes. So all the stuff to basically keep me alive and comfortable. And lastly, which I already took out, I basically had this I think it started as like a 2-pound log of salami, which was my food, which I was slowly eating away at. So that is that. Now I will show you my long gun. For the course, I was shooting this right here, which is my Quick Hatch by Rifle Dynamics. This thing, it's a lot of fun. I love shooting this gun. I chose it in part because, well, I actually have some 7.62 by 39 ammo to shoot, and it's also really small and compact. I have the Q stock on here, which folds obviously, really handy, and then being able to take this can on and off, I can make it into a really small compact platform if I want to go ahead and go like low pro and throw this thing inside my backpack. I can carry it there. And on here I also have the Surefire Vampire Scout Light. Go to white or to IR, which if I was running night vision, allows me to shoot passive if need be. And then on here, this Primary Arms, kind of one of their Gen 1s, I think. Had it for a long time. It does a good job on there. And this Tactical Distributors, lead slinger, and Slate Black Industries hand stop. And this thing, yeah, it's a ton of fun. I was shooting Bernal 24 grain soft points. This gun though, it did great for me. Like, one, I really like shooting it. Like, it is a lot of fun. And yeah, no, I was really pleased. During the carbine portion, of course, like, yeah, did good. And then during that competition, yeah, I just love shooting this gun. During the competition, there was a carbine portion also, and I actually won it with this sweet gun, which was pretty cool. You basically end up moving from, or to underload, so you still have your pack, all your gear, with your carbine, on snowshoes, moved to 3 different shooting positions, and from each one, you engage 3 different targets. And your time stops after that last one. And so, yeah, this thing, it did good for me. I did drop 2 rounds on kind of that last station. That was totally on me. But yeah, I actually won it. I was pretty pleased. And I don't know that I was going super fast, or other people were just getting like eaten up, like on snowshoes and stuff like that. But I think I shot it in about 48 seconds, like that little course. And the second fastest time was 70 something seconds, and the third fastest was like 100 and something seconds. So obviously did my part, but this gun absolutely performed as well. Overall, really pleased with, honestly, all this gear. It did a good job for me. There wasn't anything where I was saying to myself, man, had I to do this over again, I would definitely swap out this for that, something along those lines. Everything pretty much performed for me. One thing that did eat some people's lunch is optics. So this one right here, being an enclosed emitter, I actually was running this pistol optic on this AK for a while, and largely in part just to try it on the AK. Like, I'm in the business of reviewing stuff. I will say 2023, like, there's no reason to have a exposed emitter optic. Like, we should move past that. And some people definitely got their lunch eaten with snow packed inside of optics. And I was able to get away with this in part because it was concealed. Like, even moving around during the course, it's under that wind shell. So yeah, kept concealed, didn't get snow in it. So when I pulled it out, my optic was clean, which is important. And even if I had snow on this optic, you can just brush it off, doesn't really matter. But no, across the board, everything did good. Some of the layers, I definitely wet them out, but you couldn't get around that. So if that was like for real, like not a competition, you would just kind of manage layers. So depending on where I was, if I wasn't going to push through a bunch of thick branches with snow on them, I would take that shell off. And the biggest thing is moving at a speed to where you're not going to wet out layers. But it was a competition, so you're moving fast, and that was just part of it. But having the layers I had, even though they wet out, they were still able to dry and not just leave me freezing. So yeah, across the board, pretty pleased with everything. Down below, there'll be links. You can check it all out. And if you appreciate my content and want to support it, greatly appreciate it. Whether it's liking and sharing videos or going over to either Patreon or Utreon, supporting me directly there helps me go out, create more content for you. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.